About my journey, well, it's sort of almost 2 decades ago is when I started my career. So to be very precise, in the year 99. That was the phase and that was the era when digital did not exist, right? So I was pretty much learning and sort of understanding and experiencing things which was very traditional in nature as far as marketing concerned. So after having done my MBA and advertising and PR, I initially wanted to be a copywriter, like work with a very good, known agency, creative agency in Mumbai. And just, come out with, even in my college days, I used to come up with some quirky copies. I used to imagine myself redoing an ad. So that's where my whole journey of being into advertising world actually started, because honestly, at that stage, the proper brand marketing system or a structure did not really exist. It was pretty fragmented, if you ask me. So I was quite glued to the fact that I wanted to be a copywriter in an ad agency. That's where my first, trigger was to get into advertising and marketing. But then everything shaped up in a little different avatar. So I happened to start my journey with brand marketing in an organization. So that was my first stint and first exposure to how marketing and PR works. So that was with the hospitality industry. So I was in the brand communication division of Leela Ventures, the Leela group of hotels. Yeah. So that's where my journey started. And post that, there was no looking back, because then I just started loving what I was doing, creating campaigns for, or being a part of a team, because I was pretty young that time. I started as a fresher. So, helping my boss or my seniors, in areas of PR, media relations. And as I said, everything was a part and parcel. There was no specified roles. Right. Like today, if you see at company, there are like proper divisions. There's a content division, then there is a brand division, there's a communication division. So it was all everything, put together. And, creating ads, working with ad agencies at that stage. So that's where the journey was. And from there on, it just, kept going on. And I worked with several other brands. I've exposed myself to brands like Pidilite Industries. I was very fortunate to be a part of the Fevicol, team as well. We launched Hobby Ideas, which was the arts and crafts initiative. So that's something I really take in my, sort of an achievement, as one of my achievements. So yeah, so I guess it's been a lot of brand marketing. So I was always a brand marketer. And as I told you, there was no looking back, because I was really enjoying what I was doing. And after having done all that for almost 2 decades, as I mentioned, then I decided now it's time that I put my own vision to things. And that's where I started my own venture, which is again into strategic marketing and consulting. And obviously it has elements of how we can support brands in the area of brand marketing. Yeah, so it's honestly, initially it was I was in 2 state of minds. One, I was feeling very excited with the fact now I'm doing something on my own now and creating my own brand, and also helping other brands down the line. But I was so exposed, or rather I was so much into a very process-driven brand level, because I had worked with brands which are already pretty, set. While I did launch quite a few brands in India, but I was quite comfortable with the fact that everything was pretty much on the platter. But right now, I had to actually invent a lot of things. I had to actually start a lot of things. I had to actually be involved even HR-focused areas. I was even involved in employee branding areas. So it was like everything was happening together. So I used to go through my own sense of doubts, whether I've done the right thing. Should I have continued again working with brands? But then later on, when it started, getting into the shape and everything started, working on its own, and I started seeing, things happening. That's where the sense of fulfillment started happening for me. And so it was a very different feeling initially, but later on, it just started getting better and better. So, frankly speaking, I would like to highlight the pain points of what these brands experiences in today's time particularly, right? So again, I'm going back when I started, it was actually, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no social media, even digital was like hardly at a very negligible level, right? So that time there were fewer options. People were very clear what they want to do, whether they want to do a hoarding or they want to do a print ad, and they sort of got the result. PR also played a major role, getting the media coverages and getting visibility out of it was very, very prevalent. But then gradually when we saw this shift, and now when I see, while it is working to a big advantage for brands because they have several options to reach out to the customer, but it's again a very huge clutter market that we are talking about, right? So I think the first step that we always recognize and understand is what are the gray areas or where are the challenges that the brand is currently facing. See, if it's a new brand, if it's a launch, then it's like a blank slate, right? So we have the liberty to understand the customer sentiments and go all over in terms of how we want to splash the communication. But if there is an existing brand, we need to understand currently where the brand stands. What are the challenges? And once we have that expectation level clear is when we start devising the strategy. Now, the strategies could be very content focused. The strategy could be very branding centric focus. Let's say there's not enough trust factor developed from the employees or let's say from the customers. So how do we tackle that? So I think it's a very subjective thing depending on where the brand lies and what they're trying to achieve. The content was very limited in its nature, right? The way it was reaching out, while it was very intelligently reaching out. So we we marketers and advertisers cannot forget the Amul campaign even today, right? It's the most talked about thing, and Amul only depended on very quirky liners, right? Very in-moment quirky liners, which they even do today, and it's still very relevant even in today's time, in spite of so many changes happening in the marketing world. But yes, it was quite limited. It was very confined to reaching out people with one jargons or headlines or punchlines or taglines, and we were all happy with that. But now over the last 20 years, it's seen a remarkable shift. And today, if organizations or brands or agencies do not pay emphasis on their content strategy, then they are really missing the bus. So, and also the content has its own different buckets to it, right? We are talking about contents for digital, we are talking about content for offline, we are content from many other elements. So we need to understand how each one needs to have its own customized approach rather than a blanket strategy which may not work, right? So the kind of content I need to put on a social media channel like in Instagram will be very different from how I look at a traditional media. So we also need to be very mindful of the fact that we've got to have a very clear-cut approach for each and every medium we are catering to, and also what your customer are wanting to, what do they relate with. I think relatability is also a very important factor when it comes to content, and lots are happening. We are seeing video content marketing now playing a very major role in the way it's not so much of the written content. I would say it's more of the visual content that's becoming a lot more popular than what it was some years back. Forget the 20-year thing. But even if you talk about 2-3 years back, we've seen a huge shift happening from that to a video content or a visual content. So, from my experience, Rishabh, I've noticed one thing, and I've worked with a lot of, content writers or copywriters or whatever, and I've realized one thing, sometimes, we try to go very overboard with our content. We feel that something made up and something with a lot of flash in it will work, right? But I think that's where sometimes we go wrong in the way we do our content. We need to be making it extremely simple and yet very effective. And we have ample examples, for brands that we can today think of. Even a luxury brand that we can think of has a very simple line to hit you, but it says everything, So I think being very simplistic in its approach and being very relatable to, somewhere getting the emotional quotient into the perspective writing content will always work, right? And whether you talk about Cadbury's content during the festive time, how they relate with the Indian consumer psyche, about kuch meetha ho jaye liners, as simple as that, but it still connects, right? I gave the example of Amul Girls. So today, I think even in today's time, being in the digital world, the in-moment marketing is really playing a major role. I mean, see, there is only an extent of how much ChatGPT's types of tools or any AI-driven technology can help create a content, right? Because after a certain while, you need your creative inputs. You need, your content writer to put in that personal touch, which can only happen from an human brain's perspective. I don't think an AI can be 100% replacement of a content writer's talent ever, according to me. What they should do is they have to keep themselves completely informed on what's going on in the market, right? It's very, very, because there's so much going on also that you just can't be, you might just miss out on a lot of things. So, but as a marketer, I think it's a very clear responsibility to be well versed and abreast with all the latest development that's happening, even if it's not a part of your daily life, you're not adopting those things right now. But I think it's very important to be on top of it, because you just don't know when you might end up either using it or being a part of some initiative which might be, using that kind of an end technology or whatever solutions that it could be. I think it's also important to not forget that you need to still keep your principles and fundamentals the same, because that is not going to change, right? No matter, look at the COVID time, like everybody was just talking about the new normal. Now it's all gone, right? Because we've gone back to, our habits can't die so soon, right? So we have to remember that some things will always remain the way it is. And that it doesn't matter whether you're in this era of marketing or you will be 5 years down the line, you still have to be rooted to how marketing works, from our traditional thinking point of view as well.
Makes
and
sense.
What they should not do is, they should not get swayed away by the pressures that comes from the brand. If you are a brand marketer, obviously you are reporting to an organization, but if you are an agency person, you are sort of responsible for your client's work, let's say. There are a lot of times, especially what I'm seeing in India right now at this stage, because a lot of things people are still, in spite of being so heavy on digital, are still not aware of a lot of fundamentals of digital works, right? So I think as a so-called moral responsibility of marketers, we've got to educate our clients, we've got to educate our brands that this is how it works. If you talk about ROI in everything, ROI is just not measured about what business monetarily you get. ROI can be your reach, ROI can be your views on your content, right? So I think it's a very big responsibility on marketers to make sure that they well educate the people they...
Right? Everything is not quantitative, it's in the short term.
Right. And see, there are so many agencies coming up today. There are so many marketers wanting to get into marketing. But if we do not set the right examples, then we will hear the clients saying that this is, this doesn't work for us. This, clients are like, agencies are taking us for granted. And so that's how the whole, culture develops, which we sort of need to, while there's no one body that can make this right, but I think just otherwise we need to take that sort of responsibility.